Hi everybody, welcome back to the Dahlia Society. My name is Kristen. Thank you for tuning in. And today we're going to talk about the pressure to plan. Now, I don't know about you, but the little planner comes out on the 1st of January and I am not a great one for making New Year's resolutions. I really don't believe in putting a lot of pressure on yourself. I think freedom is the key to being creative. Sometimes the more pressure you put on yourself, the less creative you can feel. And as soon as pressure comes on top of you, it can feel like what you love doing becomes almost like a chore. So my motto this year is not having a plan, and I'm sticking to it. So we're going to talk a little bit about pressure-free creativity. Now, most of you would have seen on a lot of YouTube vlogs and on the internet, on Instagram, you will tend to see a lot of other people's vlogs or Instagram feeds come up with plans, the Make 9, a lot of different sewing challenges. And I think it's fantastic for getting the community involved, but I also think sometimes when you compare yourself to other sewists and the rate you work at and your creativity level, your kind of routine, it can really vary. And a lot of creative people and artists, they all work at their own pace. They all work differently. So sometimes you tend to compare yourself to other people and you think, okay, should I be doing what they're doing? And if I'm not that way inclined, should I make myself become that way inclined? So then you start feeling almost guilt and a bit of pressure. So I think we need to release ourselves from having to feel the need to be like everybody else. And that if you're not a planner and you don't work that way, you don't have to become one. I think what's fantastic about sewing in the sewing community is the way we can adapt our lifestyles and change our wardrobes basically onto what we feel like making at that time. So certain things you may make because you are either feeling that you have a lack of them in your wardrobe. You might not be feeling comfortable in what you've got in the wardrobe. Your weight could fluctuate. The seasons can change. So you're constantly adapting and changing. So sometimes making those really rigid set goals and plans, when you don't meet up to them, you can feel like a failure. So I'm trying to change that way of thinking, especially taking the pressure off myself this year. We all have busy lives. I've got 5 grown-up kids. I'm constantly revolving things around them. A lot of the things people have mentioned to me is, how do you find time to sew with a busy house like that? I'm lucky enough that this is my full-time job, this channel, and I am basically dedicated myself to bringing you really good content, vlogs and sewing and inspiration that way. So I can invest all of my time into this, especially when my kids are at school. But like at the moment we're all on holidays, but this is my kind of release from all the hustle and bustle of everyday life. So I can kind of say, a lot of people might go to the gym or go jogging or go and have their nails done or whatnot. You probably noticed mine aren't done. But this is my kind of me time, my little bit of sanity, that I find that following a rigid pattern and a set of instructions is a really good way of throwing yourself into a task that then you can kind of forget about any worries that you may have. That's weighing on your mind that you can't control. Sewing is a great way to lose yourself in that. So it's also a really good way for people who are dealing with grief or illness to help themselves cope by throwing themselves into a set of instructions and plans using their own creative ability. It sort of covers, I heard someone say that it's the only hobby that covers all of those aspects as far as using your brain in every different way, and a lot of hobbies don't cover that. So when you're looking at the your mental capacity for thinking about, you're looking at your manual side of the actually making and doing, so your fine motor skills and that type of thing, and also you're looking at the mathematical ability of figuring out yards of fabric, how much you need for certain sizes and measurements and that type of thing. But you're also throwing in there your whole creative, the visualization that you may have for a certain garment you want. So it kind of covers a bit of everything. So I think it's a really, really great hobby for your mental health. I may not be a huge planner with my sewing. I like my private life to be planned out to a certain extent, but also allow a bit of spontaneity in there as well. I prefer to, rather than set rigid goals and plans, to maybe challenge myself by throwing myself out of my comfort zone and maybe learning something new that I haven't learned before. I think that's a much more important thing to set for yourself, rather than just certain plans and tasks. Sometimes you may think, okay, that's too hard, I'm going to put it away in the too hard basket and I'll deal with it later. But if you change the way you think, as it in like steps wise, okay, well, if I learn to do maybe first part of the process and learn that and let that sink in, and then I'll move on to the next part of the process. So I think it's really, the sewing is really great for that, to give yourself small little challenges to increase your knowledge that way. I think that if we take our plans and goals too seriously, we can tend to lose focus of what's important and the reasons why we sew. Sewing for me is my pleasure, my relaxation, and my creative outlet. Another thing too, we do not need to justify why we have a certain hobby, a certain crafting hobby. Everything, I have read just recently that everything doesn't need to be monetized for us to be able to justify why we do it. Years ago, hobbies were just that. They were an outlet. They were an escape for us to just let ourselves become all-encompassed in something that wasn't our mundane, repetitive way of life. The hobby was our outlet. So what people have lately associated with any kind of hobby or creative thing that you may be doing is that they think that by monetizing it will justify why we do it. Now, we don't need to monetize everything we do. If it brings you joy and you love doing it, and that way it makes us better people, it helps our mental health, it helps us feel better about ourselves, gives you confidence. And also, I think just the fact that you've made something makes you feel really good about yourself, and everyone will notice that. So I think always having to monetize something isn't always the best thing for a creative person. Don't feel that you have to justify a hobby. Just because you do it and you don't make any money out of it doesn't mean it's not worthy. It is very worthy and very worthwhile. That whole side hustle thing that came in probably the late 90s towards early 2000s, it was anything that was crafty was considered old-fashioned, and you had to really have that side hustle and make money out of it to make it a worthwhile thing. It's really not true. Now, my channel, for example, I don't feel the need to do what everyone else is doing, because what works for them might not work for me. So I prefer to stay true to myself and bring you guys content that I truly believe in, that is my personal gift to you. Because I think that if I try and just do what everybody else is doing, you tend to become a clone of everybody else, and you're not letting your own true personality come through. So deadlines can be great for productivity, but they can also be a double-edged sword, because as soon as you have a deadline that you haven't organized and allowed yourself planning for, or a certain amount of time, you'll find things can turn to disaster very quickly. Who hasn't decided to sew something up on a whim and think, you know what, I've got a wedding on the weekend, I think I can make a dress because I have a couple of days, I'll go and buy the fabric, and then I'll give myself a ton of pressure. And if it doesn't work, I'll just collapse in a heap. I think we've all done that from time to time. So I have learnt now that that's not a great idea, and that if anything will go wrong, you believe me, it will go wrong. And it has in the past. There's been certain things that I've made that I think, oh, why did I bother with that at such a late date? Because it's just added pressure. Take the pressure, your creativity goes down and your stress levels go up, and the stress and creativity don't work well together. Sometimes they can if you've given yourself that extra amount of time, but being on a really strict time limit is probably the worst thing you can do as a sewist. Don't set yourself up for disaster. Work at your own pace. Don't compare yourself to other people in the community. If you see that they're pumping out 10 things a week, or if they've got the most beautiful detailed garment that they've spent months working on, you might not work like that. You might prefer to do more simple basic sews and more practical garments. and leave that slow sewing to the person that wants to invest every minute of their time into making that perfect garment. See, perfection isn't always what everyone wants. Some people are quite happy to wear something if it's a wearable garment and it looks fantastic to you. That might be all that matters. And other people are true perfectionists and they won't leave the house unless the garment is absolutely perfect. So we're all different in that way, and I think that's what we can celebrate in the sewing community. Don't forget, comparison is the thief of joy. I think that's a really good thing to remember. So if you're feeling pressured this time of year with everyone's resolutions and pledges to make a certain amount of garments, you're not alone. I kind of feel that way, especially myself. So I'm trying to back away from that a little bit and concentrate on what's important for me. Another thing I find too can be very stressful is if you have too big of a stash. I might let you guys have a little bit of a look at my stash. It's not very big. Now you'll see here my fabric stash isn't too overwhelming. I try and pick my pattern first and my fabric to go with the pattern. So I always try and have a pattern in mind first. Otherwise it can become a life force of its own, having so much fabric and not really knowing what to do with it. So the knits are on this side, not too much at the moment because we're just coming through summer. And down the bottom is my daughter's little stash as well. So not the hugest stash in the world, but it's enough to keep me busy. And if I can be very changeable with what I like to with fabrics. As the months go on, you tend to change your mind quite often, so it's nice not to have too much there because the guilt can really weigh you down there. So I think that's just enough to keep me going. Found before that too big of a stash can create enormous amounts of guilt and pressure to then hurry up, and as soon as something becomes more than 12 months old, it can be like, well, that's that fabric I bought a year ago and I was going to make that with it and now I haven't, and then the guilt comes into it. Sewing is meant to be a fun creative outlet for us to enjoy, not a high pressured thing for us to feel guilty about. You'll find that by watching my channel, you will see that I do quite often change my mind and my plans. So if you see a fabric and you think, I'm sure she had that in mind for it and now she's made that, well, that's my prerogative as a woman. I can do that. See behind me, I actually had this fabric set aside to make a two-piece set. When I ordered the fabric online, the print looked a little bit smaller scale. That's the thing with buying fabric online. Sometimes you can't always visualize the scale till you get it. So I thought straight away that that fabric's not quite what I had planned to make. That's not going to fit. So I changed my mind. A beautiful Suki robe by Helens Closet, and it's come up beautiful. I just love the light summery look of it and the colors, the Mediterranean orange print. And I can just visualize myself having a lovely fruit salad breakfast and a croissant and coffee out in my garden, which will probably never happen, mind you. But then again, I will make it happen. There's nothing wrong with changing your mind. You're allowed to do that. I think that's part of being a sewist. It gives you that ability. You can make really whatever you visualize, and you can change those visualizations as well into something that's going to be more practical in your wardrobe. Before I go, I haven't mentioned what I've got on today. I have got a me-made garment. I made this last year from a voile, a beautiful bright tropical fabric. I'll just stand up and give you a little look at it. It's actually like a shift loose fitting caftan dress, which is just below the knee, and it's got the little split neck. Now this is actually a pattern that I pattern tested for Athena Cacao when she had her patterns online. She's taken quite a long break at the moment. I think she's gone back to teaching, which, look, it's great for her, but it's a real shame for us as a sewing community because we are all loving her patterns when she had them out for sale, and we're fingers crossed she's going to bring them all back online eventually. We don't really know when that will be, but I had pattern tested for quite a few of her patterns and I absolutely loved everything that she had sent out to me. So this one, I don't think she ever released. It was in the process of being released as, I think, a three-piece set. But this was actually a blouse I lengthened to a dress, and I actually lengthened the sleeves to be like a trumpet sleeve. So I kind of adapted that pattern. But so yeah, fingers crossed that Athena will be bringing her patterns back eventually, so you guys can all jump online and have a look at what she's got. So I hope you've enjoyed that today, and I hope that's made you feel a little less guilty about joining in with everybody else and feeling pressured. good luck to all the people that have got plans. I did notice a lot of people that had set plans for last year, they might have got to the third or half of the way through and just sort of ditched the rest of them, because we all know new patterns get released. We can change our mind quite easily if you see something that grabs you, especially as the seasons change. So don't lose sight on why we sew. You might sew for pleasure and relaxation. I might sew because I want to bring my individual style into my wardrobe, or a combination of all of that above. So it can be, you just don't want to lose sight and lose focus on why you're making your own clothes. You don't want to add too much pressure there. Don't forget, if you like this episode today and you want to see more of my channel, please like and subscribe, and you'll be notified if you click on the little bell. The next episode comes out straight away. Thank you so much for watching today. I hope that made you feel a little less guilty about your plans or your lack of plans like me. And I will see you next week for the next episode. Bye for now.